This is Old Master Portrait Demo Part 2. In this demonstration, we'll use a soft bristle brush and blend together the value shapes that we created in Portrait Demo Part 1. If you haven't watched Portrait Demo Part 1, be sure to do that before continuing. I'll wiggle my brush back and forth across the edge created by two value shapes, and then drag the brush across those strokes in order to blend them together. If I simply want to soften the edge between two shapes, then I won't start by wiggling my brush back and forth between the two values. Instead, I'll just drag it along the seams a few times, making sure not to press down hard, only to let the weight of the brush blend them together. It's important to note that the paint was initially applied thinly but opaquely and without the assistance of medium. Therefore, the thin layer of paint is equally viscous across the entire panel. And this allows for consistent and repeatable blending between values. Let's go in for a closer look. I'll wiggle my brush across the seam between two values, and then drag my brush along those strokes to even them out. Wiggle my brush between the two values, and then drag my brush along that seam to even those strokes out. I realize that I'm too dark in one area, so I'm going to add a small amount of paint into the shadow above the eye. Not too much, not so much paint that I'll be leaving distinct brush strokes behind, just enough to barely lighten that value. If I would need to add more paint to change that value, then I would be better off again to wipe away that area and repaint with the proper value. Along the cheek, I'm bringing two values together again by wiggling my brush between those two values. The more times I wiggle between the values, or the broader those strokes are, the more those values will in fact blend together. And after I've wiggled them together, I need to lightly drag my brush across those strokes in order to take those strokes out. When you move from a lighter value to a darker value, or the reverse, be sure to clean your brush off well by wiping it on a rag or squeezing the paint off of the tips with a paper towel. Don't use liquid brush cleaner because that'll get into the paint and cause your paint to be thinner and in areas and then blend inconsistently. Remember, in the indirect painting method, every stage is an opportunity for corrections. I see that the nostril is a little bit too light, so I'm going to add a tiny bit of darker paint to make an adjustment in that area. The light shape over the top eyelid is a little different than the photograph that I'm using as a reference, so I'll make that adjustment also while I have this opportunity. At this point, the underpainting is complete. After it dries, we'll move on to color. Thanks for tuning in to Old Master Portrait Demo Part 2.